At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 350 plus programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Hello, friends. If you're looking to start your therapeutic microdosing journey, but don't know where to start, especially when looking for the highest quality ingredients, including nootropics, and what you'd expect from a true microdose capsule, check out our friends at Brain Supreme. They offer the absolute highest quality ingredients so you can start your microdosing journey knowing that you're getting top-notch ingredients. To find out more, visit their website using that link right in the description, and you can get 15% off your entire order. Hello, friends. Have you tried what may be the most powerful antioxidant known to man? C60 Purple Power. My C60 story has led me to great health mentally and physically. It's helped me personally lose weight, have more energy, and fight aging in general. You can also get C60 for your pets. Our dogs love it. They may live forever. Go check out C60 for yourself. If you use the link right in the description, you're going to get 10% off your order plus free shipping. They have some incredible new products like gummies, oils, and much more. Now, enjoy this episode.
I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is. Eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on? It's not enough to say it's nuts. You have to explain why it's so nuts. The invention of artificial life, the cloning of human beings, possible contact with extraterrestrials, the systems which are in place to keep the world sane are utterly inadequate to the forces that have been unleashed.
Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Cory Hughes. First, be sure to join us September 12th through 14th for our annual Forbidden Gathering in Fort Collins, Colorado. We'll be having a 3-day celebration and gathering, food, podcasts, a hike through the mountains. If you'd like to attend, please RSVP to forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com with subject gathering for more details and to reserve your place at the event. It is completely free to attend. It'll be a potluck event, so we request that each party bring food or drink to contribute. We hope to see as many of you as possible there. We are booking guests for September. If you have suggestions or you'd like to be a guest, email me forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. Today I want to welcome back to the show Cory Hughes. He is an author, researcher, host of Bloody History, and co-host of Day Zero podcast. Cory, welcome back. How you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming back on, man. Excited about this. You have a new book available now on Amazon, Lee Harvey Oswald in Black and White. This book presents profound documented evidence that there is much more to the story behind the character of Lee Harvey Oswald. You've also launched a new crypto, which we're going to talk a little bit about later as well. Lots to get to. Before we do, just remind the audience a little bit about yourself and where they can find you.
Sure. My name's Cory Hughes. I'm a Kennedy assassination researcher. My information is at coryhughes.org. My book, well, I guess I have 2 books now. My first book was A Warning from History. It tells a story of the shooters and what happened in Dealey Plaza. And my new book, Lee Harvey Oswald in Black and White, Volume 1. It's the first of a 4-volume set, which will probably take me the next, 3 or 4 years total. It's about the life of Lee Harvey Oswald, which, to be honest with you, at this point in time, I find far more fascinating than the assassination itself, because I am a sucker for a mystery. And once you get through the inner workings of the assassination, it kind of makes sense, and the mystery factor is gone. But when it comes to Oswald, let me just say this. Oswald is not the person that anyone has ever been told that he is. Even in the biographies and books and many movies, like, nobody got it right. Nobody got it right. The closest anyone ever came to getting Oswald right was John Armstrong, who wrote his book, Harvey and Lee, where he basically outlined, and some people will just call it a thesis or a theory, but I can tell you at this point, it is not just a thesis or a theory. I now have absolute proof that there were two Oswalds and that their lives, the documentary record showing this goes back to 1941. So Oswald's born October 18th, 1939, and he allegedly lives in New Orleans, Louisiana. This is somewhat provable. We have enough witness statements and documentary evidence to show this. And he's there until 1944, April of 44, when they moved to Dallas. Him and his mother and his brother Robert Oswald and his half-brother John Pick, they all moved to the Victor Street address in Dallas, and they live with Marguerite, and she will go on to marry a man named Edwin Ekdahl shortly after that. Now, 1941, we have this information because when Oswald applied for the Marines, on his entry application, there are numerous anomalies. First of all, I have to back up just a little bit because the overarching theory that was put forth by John Armstrong, which I can tell you now is more than theory, was that there were two boys raised under the name Lee Harvey Oswald, but that one of them went by Lee and the other went by Harvey. And this sounds like a preposterous story on its face. It really does. I mean, it just sounds ridiculous. Like some sort of play on words or something along those lines. But as you move forward through the life of Lee Harvey Oswald, you will find things that don't fit what we're told. Everyone's life is a straight line. Everyone has a past that should be able to be tracked quite succinctly, but not Oswald. When you take all the pieces of evidence of Oswald's life and you construct a timeline, what you actually end up with are two completely distinct timelines with different addresses, different schools, different neighbors, and witnesses who put Oswald in between 1955 and 1958. I've got Oswald in 3 places at once. 3. Where I have evidence to all 3, which doesn't make any sense, right? But the more you come to understand and grasp the story, you realize that it's really nothing more than a naval intelligence identity transfer operation. That is it's a spy technique where they borrow an identity from a willing donor called an identity donor, and then they use that to create what's called a legend, where you have 2 people sharing one identity. There is a main person whose identity that really belongs to, who has an established background and a history, right? And then this other person borrows that identity to go off and do spy stuff. Now, for me, the end game of this is to get a spy into the Soviet Union. The way I see this is that naval intelligence, and we know it's naval intelligence because they were the only ones doing covert operations like this before the CIA. CIA doesn't come around till 47. They really don't have their shit together till 48, 49. And so this is clearly a naval intelligence operation. There's a dozen pieces of evidence that point to it being a naval intelligence operation. But if you have a child that you're raising under the name of somebody else, and then that child ends up joining the Marines and then subsequently defecting to the Soviet Union, if you ask me, the culmination of the mission and the defection to the Soviet Union is the obvious fruit of the labor that they put into this thing for, 10 or 15 years before, right? Just the fact that he did defect to the Soviet Union as the name Lee Harvey Oswald, and we can show that there was this program to establish a legend and 2 children involved at least, then I think it's pretty obvious why they did it in the first place. It was obvious that, to me at least, that they did this operation to create a legend, to create a fake background, and have a child who they would raise to speak Russian and then defect to the Soviet Union, right? So to me, the result is as much substantiation of the plot as anything else. But we run into some problems. So if you have any questions, you can hop in. But we have some problems that I'm running into now because I am starting to doubt that Lee Harvey Oswald spoke Russian at all. That is the story, that he spoke Russian, right? And so we have alleged witnesses out in Santa Ana, California, when he's in the Marines, and he allegedly was listening to Russian records. There's no evidence whatsoever that he had anything to do with speaking Russian or communism in the Marines at any time prior to about January of '59. Okay, so but we're supposed to believe that between January of '59 and when he leaves in September, by the time he gets to the Soviet Union in October, he's learned fluent Russian in 10 months. That's an impossibility. Russian is one of the hardest languages to learn. They have 33 letters in their alphabet. I mean, give me a break. We don't even comprehend what that means. So the problem is, when Lee Harvey Oswald gets to Russia, all of his friends out there say he never spoke Russian. He only spoke English when he got to Russia. There are recordings of him in Russia giving talks, and he's doing it in English. And the guy sounds like a dope. He really does. He doesn't sound like he's overly intelligent, and he sounds very amateurish. There's no indication whatsoever that he spoke Russian ever while he was there. But then he comes back, and we have a slew of people who surround him who then tell us that he was fluent in Russian. A guy named Peter Gregory, who I still need to investigate how he gets involved, but he's a Russian teacher. He gets involved with Oswald. And then you have Ruth Payne and Marina and a couple people around Peter Gregory. They all swear Oswald spoke fluent Russian. So this is a big mystery to me. How does someone who speaks fluent Russian go to Russia but never speaks Russian while he's there, right? So this is outside the scope of the book. This is stuff that's going to end up going into the next book, which will be the next book is going to be Oswald in the Marines and then Oswald in Russia. So that'll all be covered. But in the lead up to that, there was most certainly 2 Lee Harvey Oswalds and 2 Margarita Oswalds. And just so we can get past the concept, I want to screen share a couple images just to make the point.
If you had to speculate the original purposes or intelligence operations that he may have been involved in, or why, what do you think that was? Why were they using 2 versions of this man, and what exactly was he being used for before the assassination?
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack in that question, but ultimately, I think that, let me put it in terms of like supply and demand as far as the intelligence community goes. They had a distinct need for covert identities. And one thing about aliases, you can't just, when they do aliases, they don't just make up names. You can't just make up a name, because when people do research into that name, they're going to find out it's a bunk name or a dead person or something like that. You absolutely 100% have to use the identity of a real person who is in on the use of their name as the alias, right? So that is a very common practice, the shared use of one name amongst many people. So I kind of, to a certain degree, believe that when you had people involved in these identity transfer operations, for whatever main purpose, it would appear that those names also got used by other people elsewhere in maybe one-off or isolated or limited other operations, because the name Lee Harvey Oswald will pop up numerous times in other apparent intelligence operations by people that seemingly are completely disconnected from all of this. Like when Oswald's in the Soviet Union, you have the name Lee Harvey Oswald being connected to operations in Greenwich Village in New York. And it's connected to another guy named Lands, who was also involved in a different identity transfer operation with a guy named Landsberg, right? So the CIA was connecting people involved in these identity transfer operations. So to some degree, the name was just being shared amongst people who I think needed it for operational reasons. It was a good cover to use once they have a volunteer to donate their identity, right? Oswald in particular, when you trace his life, it's really kind of strange because you have... Is this picture still screen sharing?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, so the guy up top here, that's the real Lee Harvey Oswald. Every photograph of Lee Harvey Oswald up until 1959 is of this person with only a handful of exceptions. There's a slight overlap in period between 55 and 56 when they're before the Marines. And then in the Marines, you have pictures of both of them also, which is weird. I think they were really sloppy, but at the same time, I think this was as much experimentation as it was anything else. And they had to have people in on this at every step of the way. I mean, we have documents from 8 different intelligence agencies, including Defense Intelligence Agency, Marine G2, like a whole bunch of intelligence agencies who are not CIA, who most people never heard of. There's absolute proof that all of them were in on this because they all had records and documents that used both names, Lee Harvey Oswald and Harvey Lee Oswald, right? So it was a clear intelligence deception that they were using. Peter Dale Scott called it a possible dual filing system, but it was more than that. There was clearly 2 of them. I mean, look at the guy's chin up at the top left. This is the passport photo taken when Lee leaves the Marines in 59, in September 59. He has that picture taken. And then allegedly this picture on the right was taken shortly after that. It's kind of questionable on when that second picture was taken, but it's clearly the same person. Look at the chin. It's a very narrow chin. Look at Harvey's chin. This is Harvey Oswald. I think they're brothers. That's what it comes down to. They're actually brothers. And this was kind of admitted to by Harvey when he met with Dr. Milton Kurian in New York when he's at the youth house when he's caught skipping school and stuff, right? So there's little pieces of there's little tidbits of evidence of who these guys are to each other, right? But look at the chin. It's not even close to the same chin. And the picture on the right, that was taken by Robert Oswald at their family farm, at the Mercer family farm. So
they're real close, but if you study
about?
these, there are some major differences between the top and bottom. And for those listening on the audio end, if you'd like to see the visuals being presented, come over to Rumble and check that out.
So Marguerite Oswald, the woman on the left is verifiably the real Marguerite Oswald. She's 5'7" tall. She's a very slim, slender woman. This picture was taken in 57. I have dozens of other pictures of her leading up to, 56, 57, she kind of disappears. And she's replaced by this woman on the right. This woman on the right is the woman who the world has embraced as Marguerite Oswald. But it's not Marguerite Oswald. This woman's only about 5'1". There's a picture of her in the hallway of the Dallas Police Department with Marina, and she's looking up to Marina, and Marina's only 5'2". This woman's 5'1". She's short and fat, and she has horrible teeth. In my new book, I have all these photos are in there, and I have the photo of her smiling with her bad teeth.
Oh, wow.
It's clearly not, and you can see the woman on the left has beautiful, stunning teeth, pearly whites, right? And the woman on the left, the woman on the right, totally gnarly, like meth mouth. It's gross. So, but yeah, all that's in the book. All that's in the book. But yes, so fundamentally what it comes down to is you can tell that there's some kind of break in 1941 from the official story. So, because Marguerite Oswald's a liar and she's a cheater. She cheated on every husband she had. So we don't know really whose kids are who, honestly. And in 1941, she falls off the radar. We have conflicting information on where she's living in New Orleans. And really, from late 41 through about April of 44, we don't know where she is. The addresses she gives us are not good. The places she allegedly worked are no good. They're in New York. They're not here in New Orleans. They happen to be at companies that have home offices in New York, but also have branches in New Orleans, which kind of is weird. But witnesses who worked there at those times can't verify that she worked there. Ultimately, we have about a 3-year gap in Marguerite Oswald's history, where the addresses she gave, 2136 Broadway and 227 Atlantic Avenue, are supposed to be in New Orleans and Algiers, Louisiana, right, a suburb of New Orleans. But those addresses also exist in Manhattan. And when you look at the circumstances, Marguerite Oswald wrote a book called A Woman in History with a woman named Jean Stafford, who was, she's a CIA writer, basically, and a newspaper writer, too, back in the 60s. And in this book, she admits that she was a telephone operator and a switchboard operator for the Navy at the naval base in Algiers, Louisiana in 1942. Okay, now, she admitted a lot of things by saying that she didn't realize she admitted. Number one, she admitted that she had joined the Navy Waves program. The Navy Waves program was the Women in the Navy program. It was the program when all the men went off to the war, because this was during World War II, 1942. They had hundreds of thousands of openings here in the States, and they opened the Waves program to recruit all the women who didn't go off to war, right? And so they actually trained some of these women to be spies, to do cryptography, to do all kinds of stuff. They shot guns. I mean, they were full-on soldiers, even though they did a lot of administrative work. But when you research the Waves program, if you were a switchboard phone operator for the Navy in 1942, you were part of the Navy Waves program. That is a fact. And so she lied about all that. And so in 1942, where is the Navy Waves training facility? It is in the Bronx, New York, less than 10 miles from 2136 Broadway in Manhattan, not Broadway in New Orleans. So you have some sloppy cover story stuff going on. She's down in New Orleans. She goes there and she has a doctor visit, but she might not have had a doctor visit down there because when she goes and visits her doctor, she gave a wrong date of birth and she gave wrong information. So it might not have been her. You know what I mean? So it's kind of weird. What I think is really going on here is that at some point in time, Lillian Moret, who was clearly CIA, I've got all kinds of travel records of her traveling to Cuba and Air Force bases in Bermuda and Canada. She is covering for Marguerite while Marguerite is off at the Navy Waves training facility up in New York. The two addresses that we can't corroborate in New Orleans and Algiers, they work in New York. Also, at the exact same time, around 1942, she meets a guy, Edwin Ekdahl, who she'll go on to marry in 1945. She allegedly meets him down in New Orleans, but there's no record of him ever having been in New Orleans, and he lived only 24 miles north of 2136 Broadway in Manhattan. To me, it is so blatantly obvious. Marguerite Oswald joined the Navy Waves program. She went to New York, spent 3 years doing something. Oswald is living with Lillian Moret at this time. He's just a child. He's being bounced back and forth between Lillian's house and the Bethlehem orphanage, right? And so Marguerite Oswald's a sociopath. She doesn't have any feelings for any other human being on planet Earth. And I think that's why they probably recruited her into intelligence. She's a cold-hearted bitch. She cheated on every man she was ever with. She tried to give all 3 children of hers to the orphanage permanently. And this whole time she's crying that she's broke when I can prove she had money left over from Robert Oswald's insurance. She had child support coming in. She had a job. And she had rental property income coming in. And all this, she's crying she has no money and can't raise her kids. No, she was just a horrible, horrible human being.
Would you say that there's generational intelligence families that 100%. Are used throughout history to be implemented in these operations?
100%, definitely. I don't know too much about it, but I see it like crazy. Whenever you run whenever I do backgrounds on everybody, I go to, Ancestry and all that stuff. I got subscriptions there, and I pull their backgrounds, and you will be shocked to see who's related to who. Well, in the intelligence world, you know what I mean? So yeah, and it's obvious to me that the intelligence aspect of this runs through Marguerite's side of the family, because Lillian is her sister, and she's clearly in on it. She's busted lying in the Warren Commission like 10 times, and they just let her go. They just let her flow with it. It's wild. Contradicts herself on where Marguerite's allegedly living, because between January 54 and July of 55, or 56 actually, I can put them in multiple different places. They're only supposed to have been at 2 different addresses. I can put them at minimum 4 to 5 addresses. So she's lying about where Marguerite was because she's covering for the fact that there were 2 Marguerites and 2 Lees. And here's the wild part. I think I have a very good idea on who the false Marguerite is, and circumstances surrounding how this came to be. Maybe not how this came to be, but on who this woman is in particular. So one thing that you'll notice when you go through the life of Marguerite Oswald, she is, she's unskilled labor. She works at a department store. She jumps around from job to job constantly. She never holds a job for more than 8 or 9 months, and she's always working in retail, shoe stores, and Cox's department store, Lerner's department store, D.H. Doherty, I think, was one. There's a whole bunch of them but there's a pretty clear record that she always worked at a department store. Well, the other Marguerite was a nurse. And we have evidence going back to 1947, all the way till she died, that she worked as a nurse. Nobody on planet Earth can tell me where Marguerite went to nursing school, how she got experience as a nurse, and the overlap in careers, it goes from 47 to 56. clearly, because in 56, the real Marguerite kind of disappears. Now, when you dig into the family, we have a lot of clues as to who this woman is. When you dig into the family, you'll find that Marguerite and her sister were very close with a cousin and an aunt, both named Amanthe Voitier. Okay, so you have Amanthe Voitier Senior, and her daughter was also Amanthe, but Amanthe Jean. And so Amanthe Jean, when you dig into her, this was first brought up as a possibility by a guy named Robert Duran, who wrote a book on this that I can't locate a copy of. I have a $100 reward if anybody can find me Robert Duran's book on the two Oswalds, because it doesn't seem to exist. But he had this theory that it was Amanthe Voitier was this false Marguerite Oswald imposter, and he laid out his reasons. And most of his reasons were kind of bullshit, honestly. But I think he got it right. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. And the reason I think he got it right was because Amanthe Voitier is a registered nurse. Her history is in New Orleans. Her history is completely hidden. It is all linked to one address. The census and the directory addresses for her for 50 years go to one address on St. Mary Street. And that's crazy. Nobody stays in, and her dad was at that address for 20 years before that. So nobody does that. And then her complete history ends in 1956. Gone off the face of the earth. And 1956 is the year they do the official swaparoo with the Marguerite Oswalds. So she doesn't need to be Amanthe Voitier anymore. So she wouldn't have a history after 56. So 56 is when the official swap happens, when the false Marguerite becomes the real Marguerite for the history books, right? And so, yeah, and when you dig into Amanthe and her family and the dynamics there, I'm 99, we can't prove this without, someone would have to go to New Orleans and dig into every record that possibly existed on this woman, every photograph, everything. But until that happens, that's as close as we can get is this speculation. But it makes perfect sense. It fills in a gap. What we don't know, and which I'm leaning towards heavily, is that these two boys were brothers, or one of them was born out of wedlock, which I think is a great possibility. I think that there's a possibility that Marguerite Oswald, after Robert Oswald died, Lee Harvey Oswald is born 2 months later, okay? Witness to the birth was Robert Oswald's brother, Harvey Francis Oswald. The entire Oswald family will eventually cut off Marguerite because she's a cold-hearted psychopath. The day Robert died, August 19th, 1939, she tried to have him buried the same day without notifying the family. How crazy is that, right? So the whole family cut her off except for Harvey. And Harvey stuck around at least long enough because he was a witness to Lee's birth. He signed off on the birth certificates. Now, there's only two possibilities. If they're brothers, they were either fraternal twins, and there's no reason why they would hide fraternal twins. But if right after she had Lee, she had an affair with Harvey Oswald, and then the second Oswald was born less than a year later out of wedlock, that's no good. That would bring, in that year, what was that, 1939, 1940? You would be like, have a Scarlet A branded on you, right? You would be a whore. You don't have children out of wedlock. That Harvey was married at the time and had a wife and a daughter. So for them to have had an illegitimate child would have destroyed everybody. And it kind of explains why Harvey and Marguerite never had any contact again after this. So I think it's a great possibility that Harvey Francis Oswald is the father of Harvey Oswald, who's the man who got arrested for killing the president.
Right on. Are you able to pinpoint a period of time when Lee and Harvey were targeted for this JFK operation?
Well, I don't think Lee had anything to do with this at all. So by my calculations, in 1959, after Harvey goes to the Soviet Union, and we know it's Harvey that goes to the Soviet Union because all the evidence points in that direction, Lee disappears. There's no more contact with him at all. He's gone. The last photo we allegedly have is a photo that I showed earlier from Robert Oswald that he took allegedly in September of 59. So that's it. After that, and here's the thing, you have to think logically. If you're raised for your whole life to do this operation, and the whole point is to get a spy into the Soviet Union and use your life as the legend to create for this other person. Once the operation is pulled off, you're done, and your identity is now fully compromised, and you are now given a new identity and given a new life. And to me, this is where I think John Armstrong really screwed up. Because once that operation is in place and Harvey goes off to the Soviet Union, there's no need for Lee Harvey Oswald to ever be around ever again. But since this was a lifelong, and he's a willing participant in this, they're not just going to kill the guy. They're going to give him another identity. He's going to be a part of another identity transfer operation. And there is some indication on how that went down also, which I don't want to talk about that today, but there is some evidence of where the real Lee Harvey Oswald actually went and ended up. Right on. So to most people, I can see, as I've been doing this for years and I understand all this, but as the words come out of my mouth, I can see the cringe of people listening who don't understand what I'm talking about, because this sounds like some BS spy book or some spy novel, right? Some make-believe. No, this is reality. And the CIA still does this to this very day.
Is there anything else, without giving away too much from your book, that we could cover that shows any other evidence for this?
Yeah, I'll go over a string of events, and I can summarize this really quickly because the book has all the fine details. But so going back to 1945, well, we have the indication that there was a separation in 41, because from 41 to 56, he has Fort Worth on his application for the Marines. So we can say with certainty they were split in 41. By 45, we have Robert Oswald testifying to the fact that his mother and his brother, John Pick, and Lee and Edwin Ekdahl all got together in their 1938 Plymouth, and they drove from New Orleans to Mississippi, where they dropped off Robert Oswald and John Pick at the Chamberlain Hunt Military Academy, where they would go to military school for the next couple years. Like I said, Marguerite looked for any reason to get rid of her kids. She's a disgusting human being. Robert Oswald testified that after that, Lee, Marguerite, and Edwin Ekdahl continued to drive up to Boston, where they stayed in Boston for approximately 6 months. An investigator for the Warren Commission named John Hart Ely investigated this, and he determined that they did, in fact, go to Boston. He couldn't get a lot of witness statements or anything like that, but he determined it did happen. And he determined that they had to have come back from Boston around February, mid-February, because in February, Oswald will have tonsillitis. He'll have his tonsils removed. So the problem is we have documentary records starting on October 31st that Lee Harvey Oswald was attending the Benbrook Common School in Benbrook, Texas, from October 31st all the way until around April. So how can you be in Boston and a subsequent road trip where they went to Arizona and stuff? How can you be doing that and still have a school record that you were there? There's only two possibilities. Somebody was going there under that name, or, and this I hold as a big possibility for all Kennedy research in general, the CIA and the FBI were in such a fucking panic to fake documents that they had to fake, because all the real documents will show Oswald's in multiple places and he's part of this operation. So they spent I don't know if it was months or years, but they spent a lot of time faking documents. I have documents I can tell you 100% are fake, and I can prove they're fake because I have the original of the document, right? And so a lot of this stuff might just be CIA fakery. They faked documents and got dates wrong. You know what I mean? So it's almost impossible to determine what actually happened. After that, from 46, 47, Oswald's alleged to have gone to Covington, Louisiana, where he goes to the Covington Grammar School. But we have Robert Oswald, again, testifying that they were living off of Route 45 in Benbrook at that time. So Robert Oswald is a dummy. So he's proof that the CIA recruits dummies, because they don't only recruit the smartest of the smart, they recruit idiots. Because Robert Oswald spilled the beans more times than I can count in his testimony. He got things so wrong. After this 47 era, let me see, from 47, 48, you're moving into like the divorce from Edwin Ekdahl, and that's when you get into the 101 San Saba address. So according to the Warren Commission, Marguerite and Lee, while his brothers are off at the military school, Marguerite and Lee will live on Ewing Street with Edwin Ekdahl until around May or June of 48, and they'll move to an address called 3300 Willing Street, which is down in the ghetto. It's really a horrible place. The Warren Commission concluded that they would purchase the house at 101 San Saba in July of 1948, and that they would live there for 2 months, and then they would end up renting out the house and selling it to someone else a couple years later. The problem is, John Armstrong went and pulled all the records for the 101 San Saba address and found that Marguerite Oswald had purchased it 1 year before in 1947. So once again, we have Marguerite Oswald and Lee living at 101 San Saba while they're simultaneously living at the Ewing Street address with Edwin Ekdahl. Crazy thing is, John Armstrong, who's an absolute legend, who most people marginalize his work because they don't understand it, he went and interviewed neighbors at that time. And he was able to confirm that the woman that was known to the neighbors, Georgia Bell and Otis Carlton, was the short, fat Marguerite, and that she lived there in 47 from around May all the way up until Thanksgiving. And these people didn't know Marguerite or Lee when they lived there over the summer of 48, right? So this, once you start in 45 and you start to see the overlaps and the contradictions, they don't stop. And once you know where to look, you keep finding more and more specific detail. After 47, 48, they move to Dallas. They go to Victor Street, and after the divorce and all that stuff, they will end up back in New Orleans for a short time. But they do spend a couple years in New York from the late 52 time period through January of 54. They're in New York City. Once again, we have this era that we're moving into here becomes the most complicated because you have Oswald getting arrested for truancy, being booked at the county jail, showing up before Magistrate Delaney. And when you overlay the dates, it's crazy because it goes from, you have a warrant issued on the 12th. They attempt to arrest him on the 19th. Then he shows up in court 2 days after he's been interviewed by the psychologist. So when you lay out the series of events surrounding his incarceration, none of it makes sense at all. It looks like he gets arrested 2 times from 2 different locations, once in the courtroom, once at his home in the Bronx, 1 day apart. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. If you're arrested in the courtroom and sent off somewhere, you can't be arrested the next day from your apartment, which is exactly what the documents say. So, yeah, but this doesn't end. This never ends. Once you get out of New York, you get back down to New Orleans, and then you have the most complicated series of events yet, and what I believe is a third person using the name Lee Harvey Oswald, because I can put Oswald squarely in New Orleans in 1955 summer, squarely in Fort Worth, and also another one in New Orleans working at the Dolly Shoe Company who was not the Oswald who was living in New Orleans. So, and it sounds complicated, and it is, but ultimately I believe Lillian Moret, who's the aunt of Oswald, and her son John Marshall Moret were also involved in this identity operation. Because there are at least 2 or 3 different times and incidents that I can place 3 Oswalds. When I get to the Marines, I can clearly put both Oswalds in Atsugi, Japan. Well, one in Atsugi, one in what they called Formosa, which is Taiwan, and then one back in New Orleans working at the Pfister Dental Lab, all in late 57, early 58. And then we have the witness to the Oswald working at Pfister Dental Lab in New Orleans. We have the witness whose name is Palmer McBride. He ends up talking to John Armstrong, and John Armstrong shows him a picture of a woman who he wants him to identify. The woman that he identified as Marguerite Oswald is 100% Marguerite's sister Lillian. So we can say with certainty, Lillian was impersonating Marguerite in late 57, early 58 in New Orleans when she met Palmer McBride. And if both Oswalds are in Atsugi and in Taiwan, who's going to be there? Who's the third one that's with Lillian, who was working for Pfister Dental, who had a motorcycle? That's another thing. The one working at Pfister Dental Lab had a motorcycle. Lee never owned a motorcycle. None of them ever owned a motorcycle. So it's clearly a third person using that name, and I believe it's family. This goes back to the CIA family operations, 100%. This is why I become more convinced of the CIA family operations than ever before, because that kind of stuff I didn't really know about, but more I see it in Oswald, it becomes crazy. And not only that, there's at least 2 sets of friends of Marguerite, Myrtle and Julian Evans, who are also in on this because they cover for Marguerite with conflicting addresses. They say Marguerite's living with her at their apartment that they own, when I can prove she's living at 126 Exchange Place for at least 7 months before she's alleged to have moved there. So yeah, it's a wild and crazy story. It's got twists and turns, and it'd make a great spy movie one day.
Right on. Moving to the actual day of the assassination, you have found no evidence that Oswald was actually at the book depository, right?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Here's the thing. I can put 100% with absolute certainty William Seymour, who was impersonating Oswald all over New Orleans and Dallas and everywhere. I can clearly put him at the book depository. Now, you have to think this through. The incidents that we say involved Oswald didn't involve Oswald. They involved William Seymour. Like the story with Oswald allegedly drinking a Coke on the second floor 90 seconds after the assassination, right? So the official story is Oswald came down the stairs and was saw drinking a Coke on the second floor lunchroom by Baker and Truly, Officer Baker and Roy Truly, who works in the building. That story never happened. That's a myth, okay? That actual story happened on the stairwell, and it happened between the third and fourth floors, and it involved a man wearing a light brown jacket and a tan shirt, a tan collared shirt. That's not Oswald. But when you go through the documents from Curry and Decker and all these people, they identify that man on the stairs as Oswald, but then later they transplant that story inside the second floor lunchroom. And the reason that they did that was because they had to cover for the fact, something more important than Oswald making it down the stairs, was the fact that Officer Baker made an arrest outside of the book depository at the exact same time he's supposed to be engaging Oswald on the second floor, but he's not. And this was an arrest of Emilio Santana, who was the shooter at the Daltex. He got picked up and he was held by Decker for like 3+ weeks, long after Oswald gets killed. They knew this guy had done something. They might not have known what. They held on to him as like insurance. And then after 3 weeks, they had to let him go. He was known as the, quote, second suspect. But no one ever talks about that. But you can find that in newspaper articles. You can find that in some of the statements. And so that arrest that happened there happened, and it took 5-6 minutes at least. And so I put Baker's entry into the building no earlier than 12:37 p.m., not 90 seconds after. And this is really important because I put William Seymour in the building when they stop him coming down the stairs. And if William Seymour was there, he had to have re-entered the building because he's captured in the Robert Hughes film at exactly 12:33 p.m. So he is in the book depository. He leaves the book depository. He's captured in the railroad yards in the Robert Hughes film wearing the light brown jacket that he will then be stopped by Baker and Truly on the third or fourth floor on the stairwell. They then cut him loose, okay? It's not Oswald, it's William Seymour. And this is how you know the whole thing is a fugazi. Because Roy Truly, who's the boss of the book depository, sees William Seymour, says that guy's an employee, and they let him go. He will then continue down the stairs, exit the building, leave in the light green Nash Rambler station wagon owned by Lawrence Howard. Lawrence Howard identified by Roger Craig to Jim Garrison. This whole chain of events makes perfect sense. And here's the deal. If William Seymour was inside the building, the guy who was impersonating Oswald all over the place, and he wasn't out of place there, he felt free to walk in and out of the building, that means he had to have been there before. There's no alternative. He had to feel comfortable there. He had to have been there before. He had to have been the one known as Oswald in that building. Had to have. There's no alternative. And so you're not going to have two Oswalds literally working in the fucking book depository. There's zero evidence that Oswald ever worked at the book depository. Zero. The entire story we know about it comes from Ruth Payne and Buell Frazier's sister, Linnie Mae Randall, who's a fucking liar. Right? All these people. See, the more I talk about this, every person connected to every aspect of this is like an actor. This is a stage. The entire story of the Kennedy assassination was crafted, scripted, and played out by people who were willing or unwilling participants, including the story about Oswald getting the job at the book depository, which I promise you, it was a cover story. He never stepped foot in that building. Never. There's a dozen Oswald sightings in the 3 weeks that he allegedly worked there, that he has a perfect attendance record. You know what I mean? The whole thing is a fugazi.
So the man that was caught, arrested, and later killed, you would say that is Harvey, right?
Yes, 100%. And we know this because once it's the same person all the way through from June 62, once he gets back from the Soviet Union. Same person all the way through. Lee Oswald is out of the picture, and he's probably using the name Donald Norton at this time. That's probably reality. There's a whole shitload of information on Donald Orestes Norton. And I should probably do something with that information someday, write it up somehow, or do a presentation on it. Because it's very compelling, and I did facial recognition on the real Lee Oswald to Donald Norton. We have one photo of him, and it was an 80% positive match. So I don't know what to tell you. I don't know. So, but yes, Lee Oswald's out of the picture by October of '59. Harvey Oswald is the one who went to the Soviet Union. Harvey Oswald comes back. He's the one who's arrested in New Orleans on August 9th when he gets in the fight in Canal Street. And then he is the one who is then framed by Kerry Thornley, and ultimately Kerry Thornley is the main pusher behind the scheme. He's the New Orleans contact. Him and David Ferrie, the shooter. David Ferrie is the shooter. Clay Shaw is a coordinator. All of them were in Dallas. You know, it's all in my book, A Warning from History, and the story of Oswald and all the crazy shit that I just said is all in the new book.
Right on. Any final thoughts about the book before we move on from that?
No, but I think everyone should go out and get it. The next one's going to be on the Marines, and the more I look into, see, I already have the Marine stuff thought out in my head, and it was a little over 200 pages. But I started going back over other documents through John Armstrong's collection, and this book is going to be a beast. It's going to be a 300 or 400 page book unto itself, just Oswald and the Marines. I got so much good documents. I mean, unbelievable stuff that no one's ever seen. Stuff that might be in the Warren Commission, hidden in like a rare, hidden in some volume somewhere. But it is crazy when you see how they tried to pull off this dual Oswald scheme in the Marines itself. It becomes clear he had to have handlers in the Marines. He had to have people around him who were in on the scheme. He ends up shooting himself in the arm to get out of being put on a boat that he knew the other Oswald was going to be on. I mean, like crazy stuff.
Tell everyone about the new project you've been working on, a new crypto for content creators.
Yeah, so let me be the first to say that I'm extremely critical of the crypto space in general. And I don't want to give you a history lesson, but Bitcoin came around and really was a paradigm shift in how we perceive value, right? And then you have all these other platforms come out that, it seems like these days, most of these tokens that come out are meme coins, and they're scam bullshit coins that don't do anything, and then in 6 months they're going to be gone. They're like opportunities for people to get in, make some quick money, and get out, and somebody pays a price because someone's always left holding the bag, right? So there's a lot of skepticism towards the crypto space from people who aren't involved. Crypto actually has less than 3% adoption globally, so it's kind of very, very rare for people actually to engage in crypto. But we created something very different. Ultimately, what we created is a kind of venture capital fund, and we're using crypto to do it. So ultimately, we created what's called Independent Media Token. And Independent Media Token is a token on the Solana blockchain. It is up and available for trade right now. You can get it through Phantom Wallet or whatever Solana wallet you use. But the idea was that we would implement a 1% tax on transactions, meaning as people trade the token and they send it back and forth, we would get 1% of that returned to us. And that 1% we would use to fund independent media projects. Unlike a traditional venture capital fund where they invest in things to make money back, this is not that. This is not like that. These are grants. So we're coming up with a system of distribution that basically doesn't require anything in return. It is a kind of an angel investing, granting system for independent content creators. And we're looking for independent content creators. If you're an independent content creator, go to independentmediatoken.com and fill out our little form at the bottom, because we're looking to pick up as many partners as possible. If we could have a couple hundred media partners, all being funded by Independent Media Token, that would be a win for us. So yes, please hit us up and join our growing network. But the token itself is up, it's live, it's doing well. We have about a $13,000 liquidity pool. The value of the token is about 82,000 market cap right now. So it's doing well, considering that nobody even knows we exist yet, right? We haven't started a marketing campaign, which we're going to do. Actually, starting next month, we're going to be doing monthly marketing campaigns. We have a lot in the works, and so yeah, I think it's an incredible project that will go a long way in as far as making sure that independent media stays independent.
Anyone right now can go and sign up. If people want to just invest, can they do that?
Yes, 100%. So if you're not familiar with buying crypto, it can be a little complicated. If people are really looking to be serious about crypto, what I would say is the first thing that they need to do, since you can't get crypto through your bank, I would set up an account at Coinbase. Coinbase is really where you want to go if you want to have like a crypto bank account. That's really the only place to go. If you just want to buy some crypto with your debit card, you can go to MoonPay. MoonPay is a great place to go just to buy it with your credit card or your debit card. But in order to buy our token, we are currently operating on a decentralized exchange known as Radium. And so the way that you exchange your money for our token is you would purchase Solana, and then you would put Solana into your wallet, whether it's a Phantom wallet or whatever other wallet you want to use. And then you can do an exchange within your wallet from Solana to Independent Media Token. So it's on the Solana blockchain, and we only have one Solana pair up right now. And so, yeah, that's the way to do it.
Right on. So when you say it's worth 80,000, could you break down really what that means for people that have no idea about crypto?
Yeah, sure. We minted 1 billion tokens, and the total value of all those tokens is $82,000. That is really a fraction of where we see ourselves just through natural growth over the next year or two. So the top 100 coins are in the billions, right? You get to the second page, you get to like the top 200, you get into like hundreds of millions, right? We're at 82,000. And so we could 100x the price of this coin and still be under a $10 million market cap and completely off the radar. This is so early that, and I'm not giving investment advice. I know I'm buying them. I have a stash that I'm buying besides the project tokens, because I think this thing is going to easily go 100x over the next couple of years, like without even a question. And so, yeah, I think it's a great investment. Bitcoin is going to go 100x over the next 10 years. We plan on going 100x in the next 2 years.
Very interesting. So, you said that only about 3% of the population really invests or messes with crypto at all. I would have expected that to be a lot higher, especially with where we're at now.
Well, here's the thing. There's a statistic that there's like, in America alone, something along the lines of 55 million Bitcoin wallets. So but you can't assume that that's individual people. I've got fucking 20 Bitcoin wallets. You know what I mean? So you can't really use that as a good metric. That makes it seem like it's got more people holding Bitcoin than holding gold, which is kind of a crazy idea. But no, we're early. We're early stages. I mean, we're talking like we are just in the stage where we switched from pagers to aerial cell phones. Remember that in like 98? That's where we're at with crypto. Like, this is not at $120,000 Bitcoin. That's not shit. That's not shit. In the next 2 to 3 years, you'll see the $1 million Bitcoin. And the next 3 to 5 years after that, you'll see the $10 million Bitcoin. I mean, there's no top to Bitcoin because what it does is it absorbs assets, right? Why would you put your money into real estate if Bitcoin will do 10 times the return forever? You know what I mean? So you're going to see naturally, it's going to absorb assets from around the world. Now, of course, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. You need to have some minimum level of investment in every other thing, right? Like if everyone pulled out of investing in like commodities and put it all in Bitcoin, the commodity markets would fall apart, right? And we can't have that. So it's obvious that there's a cap to the amount of money that can flow into the system. But when you're talking about things like volume and how much can flow through the system, you're talking quadrillions of dollars, you know? So one thing about money transfer, which is kind of weird, is because Bitcoin is a store of value because it's going to keep going up in price. But if I have money and I want to send it to you, if I owe you $10, I don't want to send you an asset that, number one, I could send you $10 and as soon as you get it could be worth $15, or I don't want to send you $10 in an asset that as soon as you get it could be worth $5 less. And then you got screwed out of $5, right? To me, the idea of banks and international stuff and money, global money transfer, using a variable valued asset to send money is fucking ridiculous. It's retarded. So that's where all these stable coins come into play. And the Genius Act, which I don't know too much about, some people love it, some people hate it. I just don't know. What it does is it gives like private companies the ability to make stable coins like legally, which drastically reduces the power of the Federal Reserve. Because why the fuck do I need Fed coin when I got JP Morgan coin? You know what I mean? Like they're almost in direct competition. So it's fascinating. I think we're going to see a major shakeup with the Fed over this crypto stuff.
Right on.
And Donald Trump hates the Fed, and so we'll see. But yeah, it's wild. The crypto is early in its days, and it really doesn't do much right now other than transferring value from one form to another. And that's kind of the race. How can we securely transfer value in a stable way and not have to worry about the confines of the old system, right? Like, here's the biggest issue with money in general. Most people don't realize this. Like you and me, we go to the store, we use our credit card, we forget about it in like 10 seconds, and we're done with it. It's like over for us. But not the credit card company and not the merchant. That money will not settle for those people for could be up to 90 days. It could be as long as 90 days before that transaction that we just did and forgot about is settled.
Right.
Bitcoin and crypto, Bitcoin makes that 90 days 10 minutes. That's what Bitcoin does. But then you have people coming out and say, oh, well, 10 minutes is way too long. I'm like, fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you. We had 90 days. Now we got 10 minutes and you're saying it's too long. Fuck you. Right. So that's my attitude with that. But people are coming up with new ways of doing things that I feel are less secure. Like when I do an Ethereum or Solana's different. But if I do an Ethereum transfer and I get my Ethereum in like 10 seconds, I still worry about their system and how they're doing things and the security surrounding it. Because I know Bitcoin is 100% security. Every other system has been hacked, rolled back, 51% attacked. And here's another thing about all other cryptos. All other cryptocurrency beside Bitcoin are centralized, meaning they all got a CEO.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Bitcoin doesn't. Bitcoin is just a network. It's a system. It doesn't have anybody in charge. If you want to upgrade the protocol, it's democratic, meaning there's no flip. You can't just flip a switch and get new stuff involved. You have to go through the miners. You have to go through the users, the people who run the nodes. And if they don't adopt your software, your software is going nowhere, and the Bitcoin protocol is not changing. There is kind of a crazy revolution going on right now. For many, many years, people have tried to hijack the Bitcoin blockchain, tried to seize control of it in one way, shape, or form. And the core developers, who have always been known as Bitcoin Core, they've always won because they're the guys who basically they've been the guys who've been managing the chain since Satoshi left. And they're the guys who understand it better than anybody. So Bitcoin Core has always been the guys. Every time someone has ever put out an alternative Bitcoin mining type or Bitcoin node software, it might get a little traction, like a 0.5% or something like that. People experimenting with it to see how it works. After all these years, there's a new protocol called Bitcoin Knots, which is direct competition to the Bitcoin Core protocol. And it's actually got an organic adoption of around 15%, which is absolutely crazy if you understand how Bitcoin works and how the protocol works. Because if the Bitcoin Core software is ever replaced by Knots, it will be basically a democratic takeover of the protocol, which is exactly how it's supposed to work. So instead of someone coming in and trying to hijack the chain by like forking it and trying to convince the miners to switch, true democracy in Bitcoin happens when the miners and the guys who run the nodes naturally move to software that does the same thing but better. And that's exactly what we're seeing, which is a crazy shift in Bitcoin. I mean, you never know. It'll probably take another couple of years for it to get any more traction, but it's wild to see these things play out.
Yeah, definitely. Before we close out, remind the audience what else you got going on. Bloody History, Day Zero, and I know you're working on some books.
Oh my God. When you say it like that, I realize I have no goddamn life at all. So, it's been a busy year. This year I will have put out 2 books because I'll have my second volume out before the end of the year, launched a cryptocurrency, and we're working on the JFK documentary. We are working with a filmmaker who has produced something for us that we're working on right now. We're kind of re-editing it, but we're looking to have the JFK A Warning from History documentary out within the next, maybe 90 days. So a lot going on. You can find my stuff at CoryHughes.org. He's got all my links, but bloodyhistory.substack.com is all my World War II stuff. Been blowing up. I got like 7 or 8 new paying subs lately because I did Myron's show. But yeah, man, lots of stuff going on. And definitely check it out, and definitely check out Independent Media Token.
100%. Cory, thank you so much. We'll do it again in the future. Until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. We'll see y'all then. We live in an incredible age of information. More and more, we're discovering that we've been lied to and misled about much of our human history. Cory Hughes is providing profound revelations about World War I, World War II, the JFK assassination, Martin Luther King's assassination, and much, much more on his new Substack, Bloody History. Subscribe now for as little as $5 monthly. Just click that link right in the description to get started now and learn about our true history.